Hey, welcome everyone. Another edition of Fridays with Steve. Thanks for joining us, whether you're joining us live or joining us after the event via the recording. It's good to see you again. We've got an interesting topic today. Talk a little bit about AI, AGI, and kind of some of the what's real and what's not real, right? I spent a lot of time, even free time, listening to a lot of information and kind of thinking about these things. It's interesting for me just at this point, in a career, in a life, sort of entering that stage where, a couple generations removed from, the younger kids and what they're doing. And it's been very interesting to watch sort of the adoption, the embrace, of this technology and others, from this perch. And so we just wanted to take a few minutes today, very slide light. I've got a couple of pages of notes on some topics and some things I want to hit. And just kind of relay some thoughts, some additional resources, some ways for you to think about this, both generally as well as specifically as we talk about the business. So we'll talk about kind of what's going on today, where we've been, where we're at. There are some myths and misconceptions, some terminology, and some things that I think we all are benefited by being on the same page with regards to that information. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. I'll talk a little bit about the practicality. I think a lot of you are already seeing some of that. We've talked about some of that, things like Copilot, creeping into the stuff we do every day, right? And so we'll kind of breeze by some of those things. I kind of want a more general, more broad scale conversation versus sort of, product feature function kinds of things and predicting AI's impact on the future. Well, if I could do that, I'd perhaps be in a different role if I could predict with accuracy what's going to happen. But we'll talk about some of the thoughts and some of the theories that people have. Just a quick side note. Michael, our marketing manager, does an amazing job getting me and getting content and everything we do here at Apex ready. He had no way of knowing, but Rock'em Sock'em Robots, as a child of the 70s, was a big deal. And it unfortunately falls into, I have a category in my brain of things Steve loved but didn't have growing up. I wasn't destitute. I wasn't Oliver Twist or anything, but, there were trade-offs made. I love to talk about trade-offs, right? There are trade-offs made in my upbringing. Rock'em Sock'em Robots was on the wrong side of the fence, and the list has funny things on it like Mousetrap. If you know the game Mousetrap, the AT-AT toy from The Empire Strikes Back. Certain sugared cereals are on the list, and so Rock'em Sock'em Robots was definitely something that was on that list growing up. And so as I offer some thoughts and some information, there's really not slideware for it, and so I thought it would be fun. I'm going to reference some of some of their particular opinions here on the panel, Lex and Jaron, and kind of look like we're having a discussion here. I'm sort of channeling both of them as we talk about this stuff. Ironically, both Michael and I, our marketing manager, did the same sort of thing, which is it seemed appropriate to go to one of the the GPT-4 manifestations and ask it something like, hey, write me an outline for a speech I need to give about AI and its role in society. And spit out a couple of outlines, and I actually used those to kind of capture my notes. And so it was very interesting, and like I said, seemed wholly appropriate. So artificial intelligence is defined as perceiving, synthesizing, and inferring information, right? Things we do all the time, but doing it in silica versus carbon. The term's been around for decades. People have thought about this and have used artificial manifestations of thought since human civilization begun, right? So, what we're entering is really just another phase of something that's been with human society for a long time, which is assigning intelligence, thoughts, mores, morals to, not people. And that history stretches back a long, long way. Most of what the media talks about and most of what's in sort of popular society are thoughts and perspectives on AGI or artificial general intelligence, right? And there's a big difference there. And this is one of the places where a lot of people diverge, saying artificial intelligence, absolutely, here and now, near term, being able to provide accurate, complete answers to questions and thoughts, independent of humans is a very realistic thing. Artificial general information or intelligence is something wholly different, right? That's the ability, as a human does, to not know what's going to happen tomorrow morning and wake up and be able to deal with all that comes at us. Sometimes we do it better one day versus another, but that general ability to pivot, right? It's the difference between a Roomba and a fully fledged human being that could vacuum like a Roomba does one morning, but could also do a myriad of other things. And so that's really where a lot of the conversation is going on right now, is around AGI. Because frankly, we see a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning creeping in to very specific kinds of places, right? I mentioned the ChatGPT piece a little bit earlier. One of the things historically that a lot of people have focused on is something called the Turing test. Turing was a British mathematician. He helped the Allies win the war. And he postulated that we'll know we've arrived when a machine can pass the Turing test or be able to convince someone they're a human being, right? Be able to demonstrate human capability, human language and interaction in a way that is undetectably different than the interactions you have with people each and every day. And so, that for a long time has sort of been the standard. And that's where, we are at sort of an interesting point, right? If I'm sure many of you have interacted with some of these AGI platforms based off of large language models, and kind of been like, well, hey, this is a little spooky, right? This feels like a human being. I think they've been tripped up a number of times and sort of revealed themselves, but historically that's one of the ways we think about it. We've been on this trajectory for a long time, especially if you think about the LLMs as an advancement on top of search, right? Google pioneered search algorithms, which basically said, hey, what does everybody else think is important when it comes to asking a question about baseball? Right? Where do the links point? Where do people go? And that's really been Google's secret sauce for a few decades now, which is, writing an algorithm that leverages the wisdom of crowds into something that manifests as an easy to use interface for society. And so we've been on this trajectory for a while, from the very first computers. Some things we're doing now along, with LLMs, the sentiment analysis, platforms like Dynamics and others, looking for keywords and things like that to generate, insight into natural language, human interactions. An interesting space I find, Apple just announced, their entrance into this space is this whole AR, VR, so augmented reality or virtual reality sort of space, right? How do we either replace or overlay the human experience with additional data and so forth? And there's a lot of folks that believe that sci-fi is usually a pretty good predictor of the future, right? It's a science fiction writer capturing what humans are thinking about the future. And if humans are helping determine what the future looks like, oftentimes that can be, fairly accurate. And so we've seen, representations of AR and VR in film and in books and literature for a long time, right? One interesting one to me is, thinking about like Terminator, where, he sees differently, but not, a completely reimagined reality. It's like, hey, here's what's out here, and here's more data about what's out here, versus versus a complete replacement of the world in which we walk. And so, these things are all going on. They've all been progressing. There've been some fits and starts and some dead ends. The large language models and where we're at now have really accelerated things. But what's interesting is there's still a manifestation of the knowledge we share as human beings. So, if you think about what's going on right now and the way it's portrayed, we've got some interesting allegories. Is this SkyNet? Is everyone coming? Are the machines coming for us? What do we think about job loss? There have been some, again, interesting fits and starts when it comes to this stuff. There was a recent story of a lawyer who turned to ChatGPT for legal research, and discovered that ChatGPT was making up cases, right? Cases to fill the need versus saying, hey, the case doesn't actually show this, the ones that are in existence, I'll just make one up, right? It didn't work out well for him. And so, there is still low talk of job loss, what gets replaced. The Writers Guild of America is on strike right now. One of the things is they're talking about, hey, what are the implications of automated script writing, right? What if the first script is written by machine and I only get paid for the edits, right? And so, interesting human dynamics around that. There's even been a proposed pause, and saying that, we should stop research for 6 months or 12 months while we figure out regulation or policies or the ethics of it all. And it's pretty unrealistic in my mind. I don't think if you can't get everybody to stop, all you're doing is limiting certain entities from research or development. And if you think about it, if the people doing research and development are the kind that would pause because they think it's best for society, and the other guys aren't, we sort of want the ones who are the most conscientious to keep working, right? And so I don't think the pause is going to go anywhere. But the portrayal right now, because of the nature of ChatGPT being, I won't say random, but I will say its ability to non-repeat, to give different answers to the same questions, or a little bit more nuanced answers to questions, that aren't duplicated over and over and over again. That feels like AGI. That feels a bit like life. I don't know if some of you historically have interacted directly with Microsoft, but we used to have a joke that, customers would just keep asking Microsoft people the same question, hoping eventually to get a different answer in the one they're looking for, right? Around something like, say, licensing. And so, when all of a sudden a machine, instead of saying, 2 + 2 = 4, 2 + 2 = 4, all of a sudden says 2 + 2 = something else, that feels like, well, humans do that, right? Humans are unpredictable, have an element of free will and choice, and it feels a little bit like life. And because those things are happening now, I think it's being portrayed to us as maybe a little bit further advanced, than it really is. And right now, so much of it is based off of the sum total of human knowledge, right? The even like the songs that are being written by ChatGPT draw upon all the songs ever written that it's been educated about. Can ChatGPT create something quote unquote new? Um, in a sense, no, because it's always going to be a derivative of something else. But if we stop and think about it, that's, humans are the sum total of their experiences as well. And, because of that, it does start to feel like the promise is there that this is, maybe human life isn't as free will or indeterminate as we think it is, right? They're interesting sort of big picture questions. And because of that, the fact that we have systems that are mimicking that makes it feel we might be closer than we are. Make us feel like we're almost there. So then the interesting question becomes, well, how do we feel about all this, right? And this is where, as I look at Lex and Jaren and think, this is where people start to diverge, right? Should we be fearful, right? Is this job loss? Is this human apocalypse kinds of things, like life ending events? And have we created something that will be the end of us? There's a whole nother set of people that are very, very excited about this, that this is just the continuing human evolution. Some would even argue that elements of this are here already. I think, many of us think about how we interact with pets, right? Dogs or cats. And it's fairly obvious, what role, both play in the world. But if you stop and think about it, the world we live in now has, dog carriers and dog doctor. I'll just pick on dogs. I'm more of a dog guy than a cat guy. They have dog carriers. One of the species picks up the other's business when out on walksies. And if you think about it that way, are we already here with thinking about things like smartphones, right? So, we have a device that we use as a tool, but you could also sort of pivot a bit and say, we take care of it, we put protectors on it, we carry it around, we make sure that nothing bad happens to it. We keep developing them so they're better and smarter and all those good things. And, to some extent, we rely on these technologies in an interesting way. I mean, one of the media portrayals of the future is something like Wall-E, right? Where, do humans evolve in a different direction because of this kind of interaction? And it's an interesting question. And so, whether it's excitement or fear, some of it is driven by the fact that maybe we're closer than we think we are, to some of this stuff. An interesting allegory for this, I think, is oftentimes I'm a huge baseball fan. And one of the challenges in sports is performance enhancing blank, right? Usually you say performance enhancing drugs. Well, what are eyeglasses and contacts if not performance enhancing? What about surgery to correct your eyes? What about weightlifting? What about good nutrition? All of those things enhance performance. Well, where is that line, right? Where is the differentiator between, what's sort of natural and what's sort of artificial when it comes to human enhancement. And that's an interesting question. Um, uh, Keep picking on Michael. Michael's a runner. We certainly would expect that he practices and he lifts weights and he trains and he has a great camelback water supply system. But we don't expect him to get in a car. So if the definition of the race is to get from point A to point B as fast as possible, well, a car would certainly do that. What about a bike? He's still using his legs. What about springy shoes? What about um, you know strapping a helium balloon to make the wear and tear on his legs less, to his backpack, like up? Where is that line? And it's an interesting. We already have examples of it in society, I guess is what I'm getting at. And so it's an interesting discussion. It's an interesting sort of thought experiment to say, all right, well, we're already playing with these lines, right? Human beauty, right? Well, makeup is okay, but surgery isn't. Interesting. What is truly the differentiation there, right? Do I get to comb my hair? And ironically, thinking about Lex and Jaron, they certainly have different approaches to their hair, right? Like, so where is the line is something that I think we're confronted with more than we think we are, but it's especially manifest when it comes to device, platform, solution, technology versus human. So there are some limitations right now, and I've sort of hinted at a couple of them. So the large language model, it's really based off of what we know, and Jaron talks about it being, just really the biggest platform for social collaboration. I go to trivia night at the local brewery on Wednesdays and do my darndest to answer questions. And one of the things that I notice, and frankly, it frustrates me as a little bit, is oftentimes we will lose out, my wife and I, or maybe one of our kids or a friend, a team of 2 or 3, will lose out to a table with 12 people at it. And it's wholly fair, but it demonstrates the power of another brain, another brain, another brain. And so the large language model and sort of ChatGPT and where we're at now is saying, how do we not bring 3 people to trivia? How do we not bring 12 people to trivia? Not only how do we bring 8 billion to trivia, but 8 billion plus everybody that's ever lived to trivia. And you can see how that, exponentially increases the capability of that collaboration. That said, it's still limited to the collaboration, the sum knowledge, the captured information of the data set that's presented to it. And there have been some interesting examples. I mentioned the lawyer. I saw a story that talked about a historian that said, tell me who the youngest and the oldest governor of South Dakota are, and give me a 3-paragraph biography of both. And it talked about the youngest governor in South Dakota history. His name was, Charles, quote, Chet Johnson. He was born in 1884. He was elected governor in 1902 at the tender age of 28. He served 1 term. He went to the University of South Dakota. It had biographical information for him. And the historian was like, I don't know who this person is. And as near as that person has been able to figure out, that person does not exist. Not only were they not a governor of South Dakota, they did not exist. But when you take the sum total of information that the model has access to and run it through, human created processes, it can draw conclusions that are incorrect. It can make links that aren't truly there. And you can argue humans do that all the time based off of false information. So we're not saying that it's sort of a bug, but it's a feature of the human condition that sometimes we get it wrong. And so, because of that, there certainly are limitations. And that's where it comes to some of you know the ethical implications, just to say, what where are we going with this experiment, which with specifically LLMs, right? If it isn't, true thought, if it's simply, as Jaron alludes to, social collaboration, it is going to be limited by our history and where we've come from. So should we continue pursuing this? If it can make up answers, can it independently, come up with ideas? Humans say a lot of mean things to each other, right? What if that's the basis for, and not just answers or not just ideas, but actual actions? And I think that's where a lot of the ethical or the questions come in, is saying, hey, what happens when we take, a human process, a human interaction out of the mix? Again, child of the 70s and 80s, I believe I just articulated the plot to War Games, which is, hey, what happens if you take humans with keys out of the process, right? And specifically in that world, international relations and nuclear weapons and so forth, there are multiple examples of, and true examples of humans intervening and going, nope, we're not going to do this. Where if they were out of the loop, what if that connection is directly made? And so, if obviously thinking directly about weapon systems or sort of humans out of the loop is an interesting ethical concern. So, I mean, I think, to sum it up, I mean, we're not there. We are not at AGI, right? Roombas are awesome and ChatGPT is interesting, but something that mimics all the things that we can do is I think still a ways away. We talked about Copilot. We've talked about Teams bots. All of you are getting experiences with these things, and ChatGPT, doing interesting things. I see generations after me now in the workforce, in my organization, leveraging the tool in smart ways. And that's where a lot of people put this, as just another human tool. And so I think it definitely works. It definitely warrants looking at where this works and where it's appropriate. I have lots of interactions I know on a daily basis that aren't with humans, but that are with systems and platforms that maybe feel a little human, and it makes my life better. At the same time, I plant a garden for a reason, and ride a tractor as much as I can, because there are just some things I want to continue to do. I want things to continue to be difficult. And so, I think it's a topic worth keeping your eye on. I use Lex and Jaron here as sort of proxies. So Lex Friedman, Fridman, has an amazing podcast, done a lot of amazing interviews from all kinds of different perspectives around AI, and Jaron Lanier has done a lot of thinking. Ironically, he's at Microsoft at this point in his career. He's in R&D, which is an amazing organization. That used to be my favorite week at Microsoft, it was called TechFest, where you could go as a Microsoft employee, and it was like university symposiums, right? Lectures in big halls about crazy projects that folks were working on from a pure research standpoint. The name of the finished technology is escaping me at this moment, but the Xbox technology, sort of like the Wii technology for, watching you, physical movement incorporated into games. As an example, I had seen many years earlier. It was a PhD researcher wearing a funny helmet, jumping up in the air and headbutting balloons to pop them. Right? It was very nascent, but it's what eventually became the vision and motion capture part of Xbox there for a period of time. So Lex is on the left, Jaron Lanier on the right. Interesting things. Actually, Jaron just penned an article that was in the New Yorker called "There Is No AI," and so you can kind of get a hint on his perspective. I'd recommend reading it and finding information from multiple sources about where we need to go with how we think about this. So in the real world, we're here to help you with this journey, right? How does AI, ML, machine learning, bots, Copilot, how does it map to the things that are meaningful in your world? And so we've helped hundreds of customers on this journey. We're amassing tools and experience in this space now as well, as we use and deploy customized solutions, that are leveraging things like Copilot, like sentiment analysis, and doing that kind of work. And so it's interesting. It's interesting and great work, and we'd love to be on that journey with you. So as a next step, reach out directly to me if you have some thoughts or some questions. I love talking and thinking about this stuff. My dad used to carry an AM radio around with him, listening to news and information, pretty regularly around the house. Ironically, I find myself doing the same thing. They're just called podcasts and AirPods, right? So I'd love to have conversations around these topics, even if they're not sort of directly business and productivity related. I just find all of this information fascinating. If you're already working with us, reach out to your account executive. We'd love to help. If you're a future customer or partner of ours, reach out to sales or reach out to me directly. So that's it, right? It's sort of Steve waxing poetic on some of the things I've learned, some of the ways I think about it. I think we live in interesting times. I think AI is a fascinating and useful tool, and something that, whether it's in our personal life or our professional life, has some very, very meaningful impacts. At the same time, I don't think, Matrix-like, that the robots are about to scorch the sky and put us in pods and, turn us into batteries. I don't lose any sleep over that. I think the future is very bright when it comes to this stuff. Every evolution of the human condition, inventing tools and making the world a better place has turned out pretty positively. We've had some bumps, but for the most part, I think it's turned out pretty positively. And so that's sort of where I put AI as well. I put it into that bucket until something proves otherwise. The human nature of the interaction, I think, is something that we need to get our heads around. The fact it feels like people, it feels like a conversation, is an interesting new adventure and an interesting new vector for all of us. So thanks for joining us. I hope you found it a little bit insightful. Couple of key resources as you think about, continuing your education. If you're interested in the topic, check out Lex, check out Jaron, and the information they've provided out to the world. And we'll see you next time on Fridays with Steve.